Welcome to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. I'm Michael Grosvenor.
And I'm Jack Fernino. Join us as we dig deep into Billy Joel's songs and history and what his music has meant to us. If you've gone to one of Billy Joel's Madison Square Garden residency shows, saw one of his concerts near your hometown, or picked up any of his reissues or box sets over the past decade plus, then you're familiar with the work of Edward ODowd.
Since 2008, the graphic designer and art director has created the iconic logos Billy Joel uses for tour dates, show announcements, and album covers. He's responsible for the live logo, where photos of Billy are in the letters of his name, as well as tour books and the Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden logo.
On record, he was instrumental in creating the Bridge to Russia cover and design, as well as the Stranger and Piano Man box set concepts and designs. Most recently, he designed the booklet that accompanies the vinyl collection Volume 1, and carefully recreated each album's original artwork and liner notes.
For this episode, we spoke with Edward ODowd about how he came to work with Billy, and the stories behind both creating new imagery for Joel's work and recreating the classics.
ODowd tells us about the craft behind his work, the inspiration for the designs, and the state of the music industry in general. The conversation also celebrates the life of the late Jeff Schock, an important figure in Billy's camp, with whom ODowd was close on both personal and professional levels.
Join us as we dive deep into the man behind Billy Joel's newest t-shirts, album covers, tour books, and more.
I think of all the people we've considered talking to, the guy that designs the t-shirts and logos wasn't someone we considered. You know, once we talked to him, what a great guy, and really what a fun and insightful conversation.
You are right about that, and I first want to thank Gretchen Brennison at Sony Music for connecting us as we were talking about the new vinyl box set and wanting to promote it and do some things around it. It was her suggestion. She's like, you guys got to talk with Edward ODowd, the art director. He's got some great stories and he's done some incredible work with us. And Jack and I are always up for any conversation around Billy, especially people who have worked in and out of Billy's camp. So we definitely jumped at the chance, but didn't know what we were going to land on, as often happens. But what a great, hour and a half we spent with him on the phone. And it was really great to get a window into his creative process and, his years working with Billy.
Edward plays a big role in the iconography of this phase of Billy's career. There are different phases to the career, and they're marked by how albums were doing and which producers and which bands he was working with. And certainly after River of Dreams and Fantasies and Delusions, and really after 2003 or 2004, there was a distinct new phase to whatever Billy was doing, be it the reissues or the Madison Square Garden shows, things like that. And a big part of that is how he presents himself. And that has a lot to do with the logos we're now familiar with and the images we see when we look up Billy or we get new announcements or when a new reissue comes out. So Edward is really instrumental in keying us in as fans as to what we were experiencing with Billy now, and not just thinking of him as a legacy act or as an oldies act, something like that. By getting these fresh designs and things, I think subconsciously it reminds us that even though Billy's not putting out new music, he's still moving forward in his career. He's not packing it in just yet.
They couldn't have tasked a better person to do that. Until we started talking and looking through more of his work, I didn't realize how very familiar I was with a lot of his work. Going back to the Stranger box set back in 2008, the plethora of tour shirts I've bought since then all have his handiwork on them, and he's really created a very recognizable brand for Billy Joel in the last 20 years. That's important to do when you can't hang new albums around the era.
So before we get into it, we just have two quick pieces of sort of housekeeping to go through about this conversation. First, we wanted to mention Edward's activity as a drummer, which certainly puts him in good company with Michael and I. If you're interested to hear what Edward sounds like behind the kit and with different groups, you could check out a couple of the bands he's worked with extensively over the years. Those would be Toilet Boys, Psychic TV, I'm going to say Kylesa, Kylesa, and Shilpa Ray. And right now he's finishing up an album with his new group Duel, Duel, which is slated for release in late 2022.
Another great part of the conversation as well was getting to talk with Edward in depth about Jeff Schock. Edward, once getting into the Billy camp, became quite close with Jeff. So it was really special for he and I to get to bond and connect a bit over that. And just to hear the heartwarming stories that he got to share with us about his friendship with Jeff Schock. Jeff has been a part of the Billy Joel camp on and off from, in the mid 70s until he unfortunately passed away about 4 or 5 years ago. He started out as a tour manager. So I believe it was the Turnstiles Into the Stranger tour. He toured with Billy for years. He was in, management. He also managed James Taylor for a number of years. He was also, involved with producing the music videos and live concerts. Live from Long Island, I know his name is attached to that. You can actually see him make a cameo in the Tell Her About It music video. He, was back into the fold in the, late 2000s into 2010s as Billy's archivist. And he worked tirelessly to curate and organize basically the Billy Joel archives, photos, audio, video, everything throughout the career. So he was working tirelessly on that. And also you could find him often at a Billy Joel show, camera in hand, taking photos of the show, taking photos of the fan, and coming up and giving hugs to everyone he saw. So Jeff was a special guy, and it was really great to get to talk about him with Edward.
And with that in mind, let's jump into our conversation.
First of all, we appreciate you sitting down with us. We're looking forward to chatting with you.
Absolutely. I haven't really had much contact, with sort of the outer, as it were. I'm sort of in this little bubble.
How did this all get started with you, your relationship with working on all these Billy projects?
So I've been a freelancer for Sony for a really long time, and, primarily in the legacy department, which is where Billy falls. And during that time, the sort of design director at that time had asked me if I was interested in a long-term project, but didn't really say what it would encompass, and that it would be with Billy Joel. And I was like, well, that's great because I like him, So of course, I'm definitely interested in the idea that a potentially 10-year-long project seemed really appealing. And so that's how it got started. The first project was the reissue of The Stranger. And then from there, we moved on to Piano Man. And that's when Jeff Schock came back into the fold, working with Billy. And so he became my point person. And from there, it just grew. And so, of course, we did all the projects together for Sony, but then Jeff started involving me in things gearing up for the Garden and for Billy's other tour dates, and started asking me to design things. And, it was great. Jeff never really gave me a lot of information, but he'd say, we want something really good, So Jeff and I just kind of my relationship with him kind of existed in this bubble,
Mm-hmm.
And then he would run things up the flagpole. I never met anybody until I'd say the first time I went to one of the Garden shows. And then it's oh yeah, this is Billy's manager. These are all the team members and stuff. And it was really nice because it was such a really unique family. And there's a lot of people that make these things happen, and everybody's got a job. And when you kind of get together with everybody, you really feel like you're part of something. I think for me, when it really clicked with the team was when Jeff had me do the tour book. That was just an opus, an epic project that just took so long, but it had to be done really fast as well, because they needed to get it on press. And, so it was we were tasked with photographing everybody on the team and the band and Billy, for sort of current shots, wrangling those people. I mean, I think my favorite photo session we did, during that time was when we got the band. Jeff was trust me, this is going to work, because I was so nervous. I'm how am I going to get all these people to sit down at once,
Yeah.
And so Jeff just set up a bunch of road cases behind the stage, so that as the band members were coming out of the dressing rooms to go on stage, we intercepted and we said, okay, sit down, just sit down for 5 minutes,
Right.
Everybody did. And then Billy came out, and that was it. And we shot, and that was the shot.
Wow.
So it was really like an incredible feat of sort of, people management and all that kind of stuff.
The fact that he knew exactly how to get it in that short window without friction.
And I mean, the other benefit too is that everybody's so nice. Billy's got an incredible band, all
He
with
does.
like wonderful dispositions and personalities. The conversations that I've had as a percussionist with Crystal are like, I mean, just she's amazing.
The one thing that I found throughout Billy's career is he's always seemed to surround himself with guys like that and women like that. And no matter past, present, anyone who seems to play with him just seems to have that I've noticed. Everyone who I've talked to, because we've talked to several band members past and a few present, and that seems to be a common thread. Everyone is just such a pleasure to talk with.
I think that also comes across on stage. So when you go to one of those shows, it's like, yeah, I mean, everybody's really doing their damnedest to do the best they possibly can.
And I think with Billy too, now that he doesn't have, it's been forever since he's had a quote unquote new studio album to promote. So it's all about having a good time. I feel like there's less of that pressure of promoting the new hit album and all of this. And I think it's more of back to enjoying himself with the people on stage. And you can tell he's enjoying himself a lot again.
And I think, he also enjoys a good cover once in a while.
Yeah.
With the guest stars and stuff like that. So it's, it's nice that he it was great seeing him reopen Nassau Coliseum with Joan Jett. It's like a perfect choice for an opener. And, and seeing the two of them do it together was just fantastic. The idea of Billy, because he does like his covers and stuff like that. I always had this secret fantasy that Billy would do a covers album or like a couple of volumes or something like that. Because, the few times that I did get to, interface with him, he and I were talking about like our love of Hendrix and stuff like that. And thinking, wouldn't it be amazing, if Billy tackled these covers or whatever? And I sort of just, felt like I was just like, I got a really great band for you, mine. If you want to like do some real deep psychedelic stuff, and he was just kind of like, I don't know,
Yeah.
But his spirit, is definitely in that, which I love. And he's always also been very like receptive. I've given him my group's albums and t-shirts or whatever, just share it, and we always seem to get a kick out of it, which I really enjoy too. Like he's not too cool for school. Really appreciate that about him, but I haven't seen the show. And it's been probably about almost 3 years. I knew about all the shows because Jeff had me do every single web band.
That was you. Okay.
Yeah. So I always knew like what show was happening.
Yep. Always tying into the, the Mariners colors, the, all the, Trailblazers, all the
that was Jeff's influence.
Yeah. Okay.
He always he would always say like, let's consider this team's colors, so it was rarely random. And then it was such a pleasure to like in the tour book to be able to put all of those banners as like a huge spread. It's like, this is what's happened in the last 5 years. Like incredible,
Yeah.
When the logo for the garden that I designed got approved, I was just like, to be like, just knowing, being from New York City and knowing that branding was going to be everywhere. I was just so proud.
I remember at the time when it got launched, Billy being the self-deprecating guy he can be, he's like, oh, this could last 2 months for all I know. But the fact that here we are, rolling into year 7 or 8 maybe with this. And I would travel to New York once or twice a year for work. And 9 times out of 10, it would fall on a garden show weekend. And I never missed it when I had the chance, because it was just, there's something about that environment, a Billy Joel show in the hometown environment, that was certainly unlike anything else.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it on both the, sort of the sort of attendee, and also the working aspect of it. Because the wonderful thing about Jeff as well was that Jeff was never, I still am just like heartbroken that he's not here, because he and I became really close, and he was definitely something of a mentor to me. And but he would just hand me a camera and say, just go shoot, and that would be one of my jobs for the night. And simply for the reason that I might get something that nobody else did, even though I'm not a photographer.
Right.
He's like, you have a creative eye, just go shoot. And so he really kind of fostered that experimentation, trying different things, like just all hands on deck excitement, which is always a really nice aspect.
He and I had never actually met face to face, but we had an email friendship and correspondence going over the years, and that I always got that from him as well too. And there was a time or two he even reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, I know you're a couple hours from Chicago. Do you want to go and just bring whatever you have and just get some fun candid shots?" And just he loved that fan audience. He loved so many different perspectives, and it was nice to see him want to get people involved.
Not only with that, but I mean, even in my own personal work, because I'm also a musician, and Jeff would be at every show, shooting every show, recording, do whatever it was he would do, like just so supportive. And it was never just about the work. And that's what made Jeff so special.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was certainly a shock when I got the news as well. And, one of the fun things we had back and forth is I've been a collector of physical media of Billy's over the years. And so anytime there was a licensed reissue of one of the non-Sony labels that would put things out, he would always reach out to me with like, so how does it look? And how did they do with this? He's like, you've got the eye for like how things should look. Do they do a good job with this in your eye? And so we always had a fun back and forth with some of that stuff.
Yeah, there's a little bit of research going on in his mind, you know what I mean, to get all those perspectives. You know what I mean? That was very important to him. This whole thing is kind of parlayed into a long-term collaboration, services, whatever you want to call it, and I'm so grateful that I still get to work on this stuff.
Overall, when you get a project for Billy stuff, what does that entail for you? Is it sort of the same package every time, or are you doing different pieces? Like, let's say from the Stranger reissue to designing the logo for the Madison Square Garden run to the vinyl collection. What does the scope of your work entail?
I'd say it's always very different because it kind of depends, of course, on the situation. The logo for the garden, like you have to think of, this is going to have a million applications. Mm-hmm. This is going to go on everything, right?
Yeah.
So it needs to look really good, tiny, and it needs to look really good, super big. With a project like that, that's sort of the main focus. Are you guys familiar with the current Billy Joel in concert that has images of him within the letters?
Yes.
So that was something we started doing on the greatest hits package we did some years ago. We actually lifted that for the in concert logo and started printing that on T-shirts. But then we actually did 3 versions of it, and the second version was sort of honing in more on the sort of the iconic nature of each photo, because it would be used bigger and it would be on T-shirts and stuff like that, not just on a CD package. Those to me are larger projects that take more time and thought. Album packaging is kind of like, we're primarily working with the same stuff that was there before. So it's organizing it into a nice way, trying to source new things to show fans that haven't been seen before. With the Russia revisit, we really got to do something new, which I found very exciting, because it was almost like a brand new Billy pack. So that one was extremely intense because there were so many moving parts. We were lucky enough to get, sort of photographers that were there who were able to supply incredible documentation. So I'd say for a project like that, there's a lot of sifting that goes on, and kind of taking one aspect at a time. There's also the factor of all the people that need to see it and approve it. The most important of all is making sure Billy likes it. When Sony hit me with the complete albums collection on vinyl, I was like, yes, this is what has needed to happen for a long time. And I love to sort of get into the whole authenticity and making sure things look as good as they can, but as legit as they did when they first came out.
I hadn't made the connection initially that you had done the tour books, but as soon as I was looking through the book and the box set, Jack's, I remember you asked what were your impressions of the feel and the look of it? I said, I likened it to one of the tour books in the last 10 years. I said, it's got the paper quality, the contrast in print. I said, you're looking at a nice premium tour book right here.
And all of the bells and whistles, we used metallic inks, we used spot varnishes, dull varnishes. There was so many Those files, my God.
Oh, were they huge?
The computer was just groaning, because it was like, oh my God, you're going to add another layer to all this. So it definitely becomes a thing where like, you're working with all these enormous live files, and then you have to sort of whittle them down a little bit because you can't have hundreds of like 1 gigabyte images.
Right.
The computer will just, completely turn itself off.
What's your primary design software?
InDesign, Photoshop. Yeah, InDesign primarily, Photoshop, but of course you need Photoshop to manipulate images. So, but yeah, the final is always in InDesign, and that's also a Sony standard.
Talking about some of this artwork, when we were going through it during our unboxing, because I was able to I got the set before Jack did, so I was the one physically going through it. And as I'm getting ready to take the jacket out of Turnstiles, the inner sleeve, I remember the first words out of your mouth, you said, all right, are the lyrics as hard to read as they are in the original? And I'm like, pretty close. I said, that's exactly what I remember.
Yeah, I admired your discipline on that.
Well, what I often do is I'll use the original as a template. So if I have a scan or a photo, I'll bring that in, and then I'll just sort of on top of that, work in all the text and make sure it all kind of fits and, looks the same.
Every time I'm tearing into a reissue, I am always looking at like, okay, I'm comparing Turnstiles now to Turnstiles in 76. I'm not saying it just because we're talking, but the first time going through this box set, I was so impressed with the attention to detail with the packaging of the LPs, with how great it looked.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me because, like I said, I don't really, once the project's done, I don't really hear about it anymore. My friends and colleagues tell me or whatever, but hearing it from a fan like yourself, and somebody who does all this work and collecting and stuff, like that means a lot. That means I did my job well.
You certainly did. And a lot of people were very curious how it was going to look and how the presentation was going to be together. And the overwhelming response was like, wow, this looks really good. Because I think a lot of them too are used to some of the secondary licensed reissues that the camp has no involvement with other than saying, yes, you can do this. And so I think everyone is really, everyone's really blown away and impressed with, clearly how much, care went into this project.
I really sort of strove to find the most unique photos as well for the booklet. Like, there's so many photos. I mean, Jeff could attest to that. I mean, it seemed like, this life's work to get this archive organized.
Right.
And, I had the pleasure of sort of sifting through at different points with Jeff and being able to look at all this stuff. And there's just, it's an incredible amount. And you just wonder, like, how could it possibly be fully organized? Even Gretchen is, she'll go downstairs to the archives in the Sony building and call me in the afternoon and be like, I just found this folder. It's just like, wow, where was this? It's all starting to, be unearthed, which is really exciting.
How long was the vinyl collection in process? How long was this project going on?
I think 2 years. I want to say, we started in 2019. And I remember it being winter, or sort of like the tail end of winter, because I traveled to New Jersey to two of the super fans, Paul and Eric. Shout out to them.
Yeah, great guys. We know them both. Yeah.
And also Liz, who, she's in New York, but, very helpful as well. And supplied some great stuff. Actually went to Paul's house, and Eric came over, and we just had a big scanning party all day long.
Fun.
Like if I wasn't with the phone doing this, I was got something on the scanner, just like collecting it all, and we finished this past summer.
Wow.
But with a pandemic in the middle of it, that definitely was difficult to, because really there was no way to get anything manufactured anyway. It's so interesting just because, like, being a musician myself, trying to, make my own records and not being able to, constantly getting phone calls from other artists that are trying to make records and they can't,
right.
And so the plant that my favorite plant that I use, they can't do anything till probably April, and that would be lucky. So I think it's going to be a long way. But the majors always seem to get to the front of the queue because they can pay. So as much as people say, "Oh, that doesn't happen," I'm pretty sure it must. Or or it becomes something of like, well, I've got to take care of the majors because they're going to spend more money in the long run because they have more releases.
Right.
So that kind of idea. 2 years was definitely, it's the longest I think I've ever spent on a project like this.
When you put the album covers together, did you start with just the photo and then put new type over it, or was that more of a recreation of the old LPs?
It very much depends on what's available. So there are instances where we're able to get the original photo and sort of reset the type. The Stranger was one where it was reset. But it was a fairly easy match because it was like it's a very famous typeface.
Yeah.
So not difficult to reproduce, but like the hand rendered ones and stuff like that, those are a little more complex. I go through it, I kind of look at each job, as it were, like each jacket is, I would consider a job, so whatever it takes to get this one done, so I could say, like the Stranger was one where we had photo and we made new typography. Piano Man, that cursive lettering is unique. Not necessarily matchable. So I kind of had to go in and isolate that typography with a paintbrush.
Really?
Like a physical paintbrush or digitally?
Depending on what's necessary. With Piano Man, it was a physical paintbrush.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes it works better than a mouse. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes you just print something out really big, get some tracing paper, and just kind of get in there. I mean, I was taught graphic design before there were computers. I can equally use my hands as well as a computer, which is kind of a benefit because a lot of current graduates or whatever, they're only learning computer.
Right.
But there's so much that was done like in the old way of doing things that can still be really effective today.
Whenever we do an episode either about an album or a tour or in a specific year or era that's tied to an album, I'll just do a little, a social media graphic to promote the episode, and I'll go in and just try to get in the ballpark of something that fits with what that original font, coloring, all that is, just to kind of get in the neighborhood to kind of tie it in.
And sometimes and I'm sure you can say, you can attest to that. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not easy.
Right. Yeah. Like the Strangers and the Bridges of the world, I've gotten kind of close, but when you get, like you said, when you get into,
Innocent Man
Glass Houses, and 52nd Street is certainly a unique one. And I don't know if I had heard or just got the impression that this was at least something that in its infancy that Jeff was kicking around, prior to his passing. So it maybe something that had kind of started, but when he had passed away, it just kind of got put away for a bit.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm not aware of that.
Oh, okay.
It was always sort of in the discussion, but it wasn't something that was actually, because you have a lot of discussions.
Yeah.
But until somebody comes to you with a contract or it was sort of like a document saying like, this is what we want to do. It's just talk, you know what I mean? So that did happen in probably at the very tail end of 2018, where Sony approached me and said, we're going to do this. And let's talk about it in the new year. So we started talking about it for real in January 2019.
Okay.
And Jeff had passed.
I feel like might have been like November. It was late in the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is possible that it was conversations that he had with them, but I just wasn't clued in at that point.
Sure.
It was very weird to start a new Billy project so soon after Jeff had passed.
Sure.
Because there was also very little, just not enough closure for me.
Yeah.
I was grateful that I got to go to his services and stuff like that, but I don't know. I would give anything just to talk to him again.
Yeah. This speaks to the kind of guy he was. I remember when the Complete Albums collection came out in 2011, I believe. I picked up a copy of it. Presentation, everything was great, but I got one that was with a manufacturing error where the box was jacked up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a fluke because I got another 1 or 2 cents and they were great. But something just weird happened with the one I ended up with, and I had reached out to Sony at the time just to kind of, and I think it was hard to get a hold of, to see if I could replace it or do something along those lines, and it kind of went on deaf ears.
Yeah.
But I think someone saw my inquiry about it. Just an FYI, I'm wanting to just get a clean copy of it. Probably 3 weeks later, I get a phone call from Jeff out of the blue.
Not surprised. Not surprised.
He said, "Hey, is this Michael?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Hey, this is Jeff Schock." And obviously, having been around the Billy world for years, I knew the name immediately. So that threw me at first when he introduced himself. And he said, "Hey, I an email came across my inbox about a problem you had with the box set." He's like, "Well, I'm going to take care of you." He's like, "That's definitely not what we want." And he's like, "I appreciate you letting us know. I'll totally take care of you. We'll get you squared away." And just like out of the gate, so sweet, so nice. And it blew me away with that level of service to a stranger, essentially.
It's incredible. It's incredible. But that is so Jeff,
Right. Yeah.
And I could just hear him going like, "Hey, is this Michael? It's Jeff Schock. How are you?"
Yes,
like
that was it. That was it. That was absolutely it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was it. I'll never forget it.
I could literally be having the shittiest day, and I'd hear him say, "How are you?" And I would just be like, "Oh,
I'm good.
Better. I'm so much better now."
Yeah, absolutely. It was just a very disarming, charming person. It's hard to, and which made his position within the camp even more valuable, just because he could have that connection with people.
Did you ever speak in depth with Jeff, like about his own past and stuff like that?
We dipped into it just briefly, back and forth. We never got to go too deep, but I was always fascinated with his story, just because, how many hats he's worn over the years, just within the Billy world.
Right.
It's amazing. Yeah.
But then, managing James Taylor, all this work that he did with MTV on their special shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He was telling me these stories about when they would do like crazy locations and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Like they'd have some contest and it would end up in like the Caribbean or just something, totally whack,
Right.
It's like, how did you get people to do that and to spend money to do it? You know
right.
what I mean? Incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Very
amazing.
Persuasive and just like, but never with insincerity.
Right. Yeah. It's not in a bullshit way. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So incredible guy. I know with the complete albums collection on CD, like I had personally had some kind of like visions that I wanted to see come to fruition, but it just was not, it was just too difficult to make it happen.
Yeah.
Jeff and I at one point were talking with Steinway about like discarded wood to use to build the boxes.
Oh, okay.
And of course that it was really not in the realm of any sort of affordable possibility.
Right.
It probably would have made the box like this deluxe thing that would have been out of reach financially for a lot of people.
Right.
But just imagine like glossy black wood.
Oh, that would have looked so nice. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Is that a part of the process too? When you're working on these projects, you kind of thinking realistic and thinking outside of the box and making a compromise between the two. Yeah.
We love to dream. Absolutely. Because you want to see like how far can we go and then how much do we have to scale back?
Right. Well, it's easy to shoot high and back off to something you're still happy with, as opposed to starting at the bottom end and still having that cut.
Yeah. Which seems to be kind of more present day. I think there's a lot of concern in the industry overall. Like, I think the pandemic is only a part of it because the industry is sort of wonky to begin with. And then you throw this, 2-year thing, this 2-year period. And, it's kind of like, well, what sells, what doesn't sell? It's all very kind of confusing to monitor what the desires of the public are,
It's very tricky, and especially too, when you have artists like the Billies of the world who, when physical media was king, you could just print money with the amount of records these guys were selling at the time. And it's amazing to be in such a spot now where you really have to work to crack the code to figure out how to sell enough to make it happen, which, 30 years ago, that wasn't even if it's got the name Billy Joel, it'll be fine. That was what it was back then.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you definitely have to sort of work harder to conceptualize a project that's going to appeal to the masses. whereas before you could just put an album out and it would sell. Now you have to kind of like position a little bit more.
We talked a little about the Stranger reissue as well. You had worked on that and how, vinyl's back in style. Was it very different working on, that Stranger box set, which was, on CD and at a time where it was a little unsure as to where the industry was going in terms of physical releases. And, now we had the vinyl box set where I think everybody understands that kids are into vinyl. We're all buying records again. Was that process very different, between the two?
Yes, of course, because it's a different shape.
Yeah.
Right.
You've got that to contend with. And with the Stranger, if I'm correct in remembering, it was a long box with a lot of extra pieces in it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a legacy edition, which was a digipack, a sort of like extended digipack with a thicker booklet. And we also did vinyl as well at that time. Much smaller runs, of course, but for that particular release, we made sure that vinyl was part of it. But to design, say like the sort of the expanded Stranger box with all the parts, very different, because working in this sort of oblong format, how do you fit photos? Like how, whereas like LP booklets, you know what the real estate is and you know what to expect.
Right.
But to make some of these images, in the Stranger box, be able to kind of sing, as it were, using that real estate, I'd say for that booklet was a bit challenging in that way. What was very, very exciting and very different was Jeff supplying this, the notebook.
I was wondering about that.
So that was borrowed back from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and made it into my hands. I was like, first of all, I don't even like having this in my possession. It's too important of a document,
Right.
Basically white gloves, we had everything scanned and stuff like that. And then I had to rebuild a spiral bound notebook into something that was going to be able to be printed, so it was a little complicated. And there was definitely some formatting things where things had to be kind of reworked a little bit to actually fit. How exciting to add that document, and I have a feeling he probably has one for every album that we may or may not ever see.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. When it came to that notebook, along with all the care that went into just, preserving it, was there anything you felt you had to do to really capture its essence besides just taking the pictures? I'm wondering if there was anything about maybe the lighting or just how you approached it.
Well, the lighting, absolutely, even lighting, of course, to make sure it doesn't look distorted or anything. But the care, for me on that reproduction, the care was in the paper, the type of paper that we used. And it's very hard to get big companies to kind of like go outside of their, this is what we use, this is what's within budget. It's like, no, let's use paper that really makes sense.
Right.
So that was, for me, that was one area where I got to really push through and, preserve and make it into something that I felt was authentic, that would look and feel and read like an actual notebook, because we weren't able to use spiral bound because, it would have damaged the other contents of the box. For example, I recently did something for an indie label where it was only on CD. And even at that, I think it only was ever 300 copies or something like that, like a really obscure avant jazz record. So it was a painting on the cover and they're just like, we can't access the painting. We can't access, all we have is this one CD cover. And so I just experimented with my phone because the iPhones have a triple camera now.
Right.
Got myself a mount, kind of positioned it, perfect angle, lit it, shot it, and then just photoshopped it to the point where it looked like it was brand new again.
Wow.
I don't know how 30 years of me being in this industry, how I absorbed all this information.
Right.
But I just have a sense of how to do it now and understand the process. And you need to know how printing works. And there's just a lot of factors. With Billy, I know when we did the complete albums collection, everything, like all the original LP jackets were scanned on like a large format scanner. And it was sort of an expensive endeavor. And that was really the only way at that time to do it. But now there's all these other devices where you can easily produce that.
Wow.
It's a little scary for the bootlegging situation, because it kind of makes it a bit easier to make a perfect looking product. Billy's, like all the ephemera and stuff like that. So I'm sure you've had your experience with bootlegs.
Oh, certainly.
Right. So, what, do you see a lot of that still? Because it seems like, to me, people wouldn't necessarily sink the money into making a record because it's much more expensive now.
I feel like that's really not done with him often these days. Most of what I've seen as far as anything physical that's hasn't been this, the Sony directly issued stuff is, like I said, the licensed stuff that was done to like Friday Music and Music on Vinyl and those other labels. But again, you can tell that they're not working. You can tell that they're taking a vinyl copy of the Nylon Curtain, scanning it. I mean, you can see the scan marks, and you can see some of those artifacts that it's like, oh, that's, you look at it and you're like, oh, that's too bad.
Right. You want it old, but you want it new.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's mostly what I've seen over the years, just some of those reissues with those labels. And I think there was a small label in New York that did like a picture disc of The Stranger, things like that. But I'm not seeing him heavily bootlegged these days.
That's great. It's so hard to get people to not.
Though I haven't seen anybody attempt to bootleg it physically, I think the one thing that people are trading the most out there is the original 1971 mix of Cold Spring Harbor. The original release is vastly different than the one that Columbia had put out, and that's on this set. It's a totally different mix, different arrangements, different performances.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't even consider that would be something that people would want.
Yeah.
What I want is Attila.
I have 2 copies in my office, and I tell you what, Billy dumps on it quite a bit, and there's some good stuff there.
It really is. I mean, if you think about what was happening at that time, he was a contender in my eyes. I mean, I really feel like that record stands on its own. But I have an ear for sort of like, doom, psych, all that sort of thing, which has become much more popular in the last 15 years.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, it seems, it kind of fits in that echelon. Yeah. And I love the, like the long hair and all that stuff. I thought he looked great.
Yeah. It's amazing how he went in 10 months' time from Brain Invasion to She's Got Away.
Well, because in a sense, you wonder if he thought like, screw what's hip. I want to do what I like, which was She's Got Away. It seemed like to be, sort of fitting in with what was going on at that time. Then when he broke off and did his own thing, it totally just usurped everything else, Do
you think there's been a change in the way people have been approaching reissues? When we did our unboxing, I really thought back to the Jimi Hendrix reissues in the 90s, which I think is the most extreme example where they had completely different cover art for like Are You Experienced, Axis, and Electric Ladyland, and then we get to now where, you recreated the vinyl, and then I guess the Stranger box set will probably be in the middle. If I remember correctly, like the actual box, the outside box is not the classic cover, but when you open it, you get the classic cover. Has that been a trend towards, recreating versus reimagining, or is that more of a project to project sort of thing?
It's project to project, I mean, I feel like there's been sort of a return to authenticity in a sense, like especially in the last decade where people are wanting to do reissues that look like the originals, like hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. I've done reissues for labels where they even want the mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
So like a sort of like editorial mistake that's on the jacket. They'll want to keep that there.
Yeah.
Even though I've rekeyed and everything and put fresh typography everywhere, they're like, no, that mistake has got to be there because that's how it was originally. And I feel like that's definitely a sort of a leaning of the last decade, where before that, I think people were a little more prone to reimagine it because the market would also bear it. But I think the market isn't as interested in that currently, in my opinion. What did you think of the Great American Music Hall?
That blew me away, to be honest with you. I never knew it existed. I knew the lore of that time frame when like Doug Stegmeyer came out and played, did that run with Billy, and that was the kind of transition when Billy was going to go back to New York and Doug brought along Liberty and everybody, and so I kind of knew that story, but I never knew the whole situation of those shows being recorded to kind of sell to Columbia to use the band, and so that whole story was new. And gosh, it sounds so good.
Beautiful, right? I mean, just really like stellar recording.
I mean, I was blown away that just has sat in an archive for 40 something years. And I'm so glad that was included because I think that's certainly a big attraction to a lot of people who have a lot of the studio albums over the years. So I think that's such a good idea to include things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it becomes a matter of like what's approved and all that sort of thing, which is those aspects of things I'm not involved with. So, but there were other things that were being looked at or whatever, and I was just really glad that they arrived on that because it had been sitting, and I had actually designed something for that cover when it was potentially going to be used for something else.
Oh, okay.
And so that image was like set from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that image perfectly depicts what the release is.
From what my recollection was, there was originally plans to do what was done with The Stranger and Piano Man for more of the catalog, but it, after those two, it just probably sales dictated that, or, something like that, who knows, but wouldn't be surprised if that was going to be part of like a Street Life Serenade, reissue or something like that. Yeah.
There was a period, because it is interesting when you talk about that, because I'd sort of forgotten, we did Stranger, Piano Man, and then we seemed to take like a hard left turn into Russia. But before that, Jeff and I had conversations about turnstiles.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some ideas about going back to that subway station and reshooting stuff. And kind of doing like a then and now sort of idea, but that never came to pass. And I guess, I'm not sure if it's sales or it just seems like physical product is kind of going by the wayside.
Well, I think with the CD set that you were involved with, I think that was at the tail end of being able to do a CD set like that, and that was before vinyl really came back in. You kind of struck that and those first Stranger and Piano Man reissues at the right time, but everything shifted digitally so quickly after that.
Yeah, it's a strange conundrum because it's sort of I don't know, the big labels seem to be kind of doing stuff that's incongruous with what people actually want. Like to be just a digital company and like not have product and stuff like that. But I don't know, every young person I know these days wants vinyl.
Yeah. And I work with a lot of bands over the years who had success in the 90s, which back then no one's records were getting put on vinyl. So you're starting to see a lot of albums get reissued for the first time on vinyl because of, the resurgence of it.
Yeah, these sort of boutique, I don't think Sony really has one necessarily, but with Warner, you have Rhino.
Mm-hmm.
And within Rhino, there's boutiques within that.
Right.
So I happen to work for one of the boutique labels. Constantly, I'm getting sort of called to make something that it came out on CD on vinyl. And it's quite a conundrum because there's a lot of technical stuff involved. But it's like the technology just keeps getting easier. And so I've developed ways to sort of reproduce these things and you'd never know.
If they ask for my advice as part 2 is being prepped, there's certainly things of that era that fans have been clamoring for years that exist. Yeah. Live from Long Island, the Nassau Coliseum show from '82, which was an incredible film. People have been itching to see that come back to life. And so there are things like that I think would work without going too deep.
I would say you should definitely bring that up with Gretchen.
If she's interested in our thoughts, we'd be happy to share them for sure.
The great thing about that, the Sony team and the Billy, they're very, approachable.
Yeah, no, she was so nice out of the gate. And it was actually Eric Fellon who put us in touch. He knows us in the podcast and things like that. And he spoke so highly of the two of you, said, yeah, I contributed some stuff to them and they were just amazing. So you should definitely reach out.
Yeah. And when Gretchen reached out to me and said, would you be interested? I was like, of course, like I rarely get the opportunity to talk about this stuff in this way. And Eric and Paul, like I've definitely I've been sort of keeping some surprises for them. So,
Oh, nice.
Press proofs and things like that, I have to look at or whatever, but then, why destroy them when somebody can enjoy them?
There's those of us in the world that just love that sort of thing. And I love the deep dives and the work in progress and see how things developed. Edward, thank you so much for sitting down with Jack and I. What a treat. It's so great to know, and it's evident by your work how much you care about the projects you're doing for every artist, but Billy Joel especially. So as a fan and as a podcaster who devotes a lot of time now to Billy Joel, we sincerely thank you for all of the work and doing it right and doing good by Billy and the fans. So thank you for that. And then also, again, Gretchen Brenneson at Sony Music for connecting us in the first place.
And with that in mind, now it's time to hear from you. What did you think of this conversation? Also, now's a good time to find out what people have thought about the reissues over the years. What were your thoughts about the Stranger box, the Piano Man box, the Live from Russia, Matter of Trust box? Have you bought a t-shirt in the last couple of years and really liked the design? Are you always pleasantly surprised when you see those banner ads or online announcements when Billy's coming to your town? Or if you're headed to Madison Square Garden for a show? Or if you've picked up a tour book, what do you think of those? And of course, what did you think of the album collection, cover recreations, and the booklet that comes with it with the new box? We're always excited to get your part of the story. You can email us at glasshousespodcast@gmail.com or find us on the socials, Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. And once you've done all that, please remember to head over to Apple Podcasts if that's where you get your podcasts. If you're so inclined, please give us a favorable review and a 5-star rating. Every favorable review and 5-star rating tells the almighty algorithm that we put out some quality work and it should promote us to more people. It's a fast, easy, and free way to help us grow our community.
And in the conversation with Edward, we talked about some of our Billy Joel Completely Retold friends who were involved in the memorabilia selection for the vinyl box set. I would love to hear your thoughts and your experience working with Edward on the project, and what was it like going through your collections with him and working with him to put this box set together, and also what was it like when you first opened your copy of the set and got to see something of yours in the package? I'm very curious to know what that experience was like for you. We have a lot ahead of us still, and we can't wait to dive into it. And your help with spreading the word, those positive reviews and ratings, and telling your friends about the podcast and sharing our pages and our posts, it all goes such a long way to continue to grow it, which helps fuel us to continue to do what we're doing. So everything you do means a lot to both of us, and we really appreciate it.
And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.